And now we are moving to, again, another talk, taking up from Zhang, also on the LBGT SOGI community, and Dédé Oetomo from Indonesia will discuss in terms of have a place at the table. Yeah, how can Dédé is very well known. He's well, one of the first gay activists openly gay activists in Indonesia at a time where was not popular, or not, there were not many, maybe 30, 40 years
30.
ago. More than 40. Yeah. Okay, and he has consistently, but his real background is actually PhD in linguistics. So
True.
from Cornell University. So please, Dédé.
Thank you, Leah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for having me here. This is the 9th Asia Pacific Conference. I was at the first one, and when Leah was giving his keynote, I couldn't help thinking about, how we've actually progressed in many ways. In terms of the conference, in the topics, I think it's very comprehensive, as you can see from the program. And so thank you, Leah, for, and also the scientific committee, the steering committee, for putting everything together. Now, I will start by just probably pointing out to the obvious that everywhere in Asia and the Pacific, and if you look at the young people who were in the skit, who were here, who was the MC, some of them you probably wouldn't know their gender. doesn't matter, I guess. And they, my gaydar is saying some of them are gay. And I don't know, maybe they're not. But my point is that nowadays, in Asia and the Pacific, there are people and communities of diverse sexual orientations, gender identities and expressions, and sex characteristics. I know it's a mouthful, SOGIES, but that seems to be the accepted term now, and I'll stick to that. And they're becoming increasingly visible, as I said just now. Leah said that when I came out in 1980, it was unusual in Indonesia, especially. But now it's very common. Of course, not everyone has come out, and not everyone needs to come out. Some of the people in Indonesia and other parts of Asia say about coming in. So basically, accepting themselves and being in the family, because they say the family in Asia is important and all that. So that is taken into account. But they're also assertive. Listen to the young people who were screaming today. And I'll go back to them later. And then the new constructions. Zhang was mentioning, we don't understand the complexities. We sometimes have not taken into account the complexities of the new constructions, sometimes without even terms. And we're still learning about these new constructions. I'll share with you one story from actually just about 60 kilometers from where I live. And this is part of something that I'd showcase later. These days in Indonesia, to work on SOGIES diversity is not easy, or almost impossible. So we use a front, usually pluralism or working with interfaith organizations. So at one of these small sessions, there was a person. Let me start with a person, a human person, that later turned out to be, I guess, and he called himself in English, trans man. He's only 16. And he said, I knew it. I couldn't continue going to school in my female clothing, and she's from a Muslim community. Of course, she had to wear the veil. But so to go to this meeting, she had to stop. After 30 meters from home, she actually quickly took off the veil and changed into male clothing, and only then he would be safe. Notice I changed the genders. He would be safe. So this is actually an example, and he's now trying to get his high school diploma, like there's an equalizing program, And we wish him good luck. He hasn't started transition because of cost and everything. But this is the reality. 16-year-old, and you want to be a man when you were born female. And and if we're not leaving anyone behind, what do we do about him? Right? And then I guess I mentioned about progress, and we have to admit that there is some progress. My Australian friends amongst the participants reminded me about the marriage equality plebiscite. So congratulations, Australia. Your Senate still needs to work on some legislation, but I guess you're on the way there. But something that is more surprising for Asia is Taiwan. Taiwan probably will have a same-sex marriage law next year. Whether, if the government doesn't want it, it will be automatic. That's what the Constitution says. What is the effect on the Chinese diaspora? I haven't actually chance to talk with Michael about this, but this is something that, now, can you accuse, if you're from an ethnic Chinese family in Asia, or Chinese family for that matter, can you accuse this from the West? For God's sake, it's from Taiwan. Well, Taiwan is problematic to China, but something else. I'm not gonna, sorry, Chinese people. I don't want to get into the mess. But then again, Nepal has actually discussed about this, and we're in Vietnam where as I understand, I don't think I'm wrong, there was discussion about civil union a few years ago. Here, and is this from the West? I don't think so. So this is something that is actually, I think, progress. And then in the area of gender identity, there's talk now here again in Vietnam, but also in Thailand about legal gender recognition. And I hope they learn from other countries that they do not require surgery, sterilization, the whole works. Yeah, because that's the challenge. But it's happening, and we wish them well. And if you remember 1994, I wasn't in Cairo, but those of you who were in Cairo remember that there was actually like a delay, like a recess, because somebody from the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission was not allowed to speak. Yeah. Now at the UN, still some resistance from some countries. There is it's another mouthful. United Nations Independent Expert on the Protection Against Violence and Discrimination on the Basis of Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, the UNISOGI. And the first UNISOGI was an Asian, a Thai professor, Professor Viti Thundabon. And hey, it's Asia again, it's in our region. And if you haven't done so, please read his reports. There are two of his reports. Unfortunately, he resigned because of health reasons, but his reports actually should be required reading for this conference because it shows the roadmap to, including to an inclusive society to leaving no one behind. And I think I can't help announcing this because yesterday the Yogyakarta Principles Plus 10 was launched in Geneva. So this is actually an amendment to the Yogyakarta Principles, which originally was drafted in 2006, and it basically is the principles and state obligations on applying existing international human rights law in relation to SOGIE, now of course SC. And I actually use SOGIE SC because that's the term that is used in the Yogyakarta Principle. Again, please go to the website and read them. But nevertheless, regrettably, there is still some bad news in our region. From Leah mentioned it in the keynote speech, her keynote speech, of a conservative turn in many of our societies. My comrades in Bangladesh, many of them have had to leave the country. They are in asylum right now. They cannot even live in Bangladesh because they would be killed. I mean, us in Indonesia, sometimes we take kind of solace. Oh, at least they're not killing us. Not necessarily true. If you're an unlucky trans woman in the wrong part of the city, even in Jakarta, you can get killed. And so it still happens. But this is a trend now in many. I mean, thank you, Leah, for mentioning the United States. But it's everywhere. And this is something that we're actually facing right now. Like Angela said, it's always traditions, cultures, and that is economic development. I'm not a total believer in this, but at least there is work by economists like Lee Badgett at University of Massachusetts, at Amherst, and also at Williams Institute at UCLA that actually counts. What is the cost of, well, at least in this case, homophobia and transphobia? You can also do it at the cost of actually gender inequality to the nation, to the country. And Lee Badgett actually counted, for India, it's $1.5 billion a year. For Indonesia, probably $1.2 billion a year. So I don't know. Can we convince the powers that be that you're losing money if if you treat people differently? But that's something that is at least in the discourse. And I can't help, and I hope I'm not ruffling feathers here, that for a long time, and probably still, Leah mentioned authoritarianism, so I actually feel a bit more comfortable saying that we have gone through authoritarian governments. And some governments are still authoritarian, as Leah said. And I can't, okay, here's how I came to this thinking. In the 80s and 90s, as a younger lecturer, if I were to organize a discussion, let's say in Indonesia on the ethnic Chinese, I might be called in by the military. I might be accused of being a communist. Oops, I'm in a communist country, right? Okay, I guess I'm safe. Yeah, things like that. But the idea is that you have to duck, you have to be careful. Nowadays, if I were to give this talk openly at the university with SOGIES, they wouldn't allow it. Maybe my dean is okay, but somebody is going to call, and this time it's not the military. It's actually the Council of Muslim Clerics who's going to call. There's the difference. See, the monsters have changed. Now they're not in green, they're in white in Indonesia. So my point is that, things haven't changed much. We've had to face the same threat often, but I guess the comforting thought is that you can use the same strategies that you used to do when you were facing authoritarianism. For example, using a front. I remember in the old Indonesia under Suharto, when we wanted to do a political meeting, and it happened to be Ramadan, we would say, "Oh, it's breaking the fast." Yeah. Well, of course we ate and everything, and then of course we discussed politics afterwards. So nowadays, if you want to do an SOGIES workshop, you call it an interfaith workshop, and you drag your interfaith ally and say, "Hey, and it's actually good because they also learn." See, they're actually bandying about pluralism. I said, well, can you be pluralist about everyone? And then, that challenges them. It's not always easy. It's not always, We have been actually also thrown out of a hall once in a university, an Islamic university, but that's the only time in about 12 occasions. So I guess we are living, in an unfinished region. I remember my friend Max Lane calls Indonesia an unfinished nation. I guess, and nothing is finished in life, I suppose. So, this is what we need to do. And what is important, and I agree completely with Leah, the so-called SOGIES activists need to actually look at least to the feminists, to the HIV activists, but also to the people who are working with disabled people, working with aging people, with youth, with all kinds of people. But I think that we should also be warned that our enemies know about these strategies, so we've got to be careful. So I'll close there, and we can discuss things. Thank you.